Hey everyone, Sean here, and today in this video, I definitely wanted to sit down and talk about this because it is regarding to the Genshin Impact related interview by Gamespot, and they were talking to somebody from Hoyoverse, mostly regarding to the future state of the game. And the overall, majority opinion of this entire interview is looking pretty in the disfavor for Hoyoverse, and it's definitely upsetting a lot of people, which I do understand, and I'm definitely leaning more towards that. But I'm just pretty much gonna go over the interview, and we can definitely talk about it. But TLDR, to summarize what has happened from this interview, is that it's pretty much they pretty much spat on that sort of principle. They spat on those hopes, and pretty much disappointed a lot of players who have always been looking forward to the endgame content pertaining to the combat, especially with Spiral Abyss. We were hoping to see something besides the Spiral Abyss, something to really have us test the characters. How much damage they can do, how much of a team synchronization that we have at the current state. Something to exercise that. But then Hoyoverse came out and said pretty much, nah, and it's not just that part too, but not to mention the resin is something of concern. They're not providing resin because they think they're providing those things through other means, but I think once we go over this interview, it all kind of makes sense, and it will show how kind of ignorant, blind, and of course even contradictory they are to themselves from this entire interview. Okay, so GameSpot started with this question. So versions 3.0 and 3.1 are expected to be 1 week shorter than the usual. In the future, will you be continuing with these shortened version lengths, or should players expect update releases to return to their former pace? Starting from, this is Hoyoverse's answer. They answered, starting from 3.0 to the end of 3.2, the length of each update will be shortened to 5 weeks, but a shorter update cycle will not influence the quality of gameplay and content. Please stay tuned. And that's kind of cool, I guess. This is one of the only things that are mostly positive, or leaning more towards the positive part, because they are concerned with the pacing of the update cycle, and they are considering changing it to the 5 week cycle rather than the 6 weeks or something like that. I think that's a pretty good number. Even with just 1 week, there's a pretty big difference, right? It's been feeling like a lot more rapid fire in comparison to before. It just feels like there's more content flowing in than there has been before. It doesn't feel like a slog by any means. It just feels like there's something new to look forward to at a pretty reasonably faster pace, while doesn't strain the quality or by any means on the development side of things. So if it works out, I would definitely love to see the 5 week cycle. I think it's been working out pretty well so far, and hoping that they would take this beyond 3.2 and take this philosophy and just let this become a permanent thing. I think it would be a great thing to consider. Okay, so next question we have from GameSpot. Currently, the Spiral Abyss, here comes the big one. The Spiral Abyss is the only true endgame content for players at high adventure ranks. Are there any plans to release new permanent endgame content in the same vein as the Spiral Abyss? And they answered, the Spiral Abyss is one of the most effective ways for players to test out their party composition and combat strength. Yes, if we design another type of permanent endgame that is similar to the Spiral Abyss, it might end up creating excessive anxiety for our players. Not everyone is interested in Musk Reef. See, that's the real kicker right here in this entire answer. Of the entire answer, that sentence is very, very much like getting kicked in the balls, because this entire game, you gotta remember, this is a gacha game, and what are gacha games built around? FOMO. And what does FOMO bring? Anxiety, right? How do you have players stick with the events, all that other stuff, you know, to make sure the players are consistently around? You play around with their psychology, right? Therefore, you play around with the anxiety, and you create that FOMO with these specific events that are exclusive to these dates, and make the players have to join said event so that we can try to indulge on the rewards that we get from playing these events, such as the weapons, such as the materials that we can get, all the other little trinkets and goodies and all that BS, right? And yet but here in the sentence, that why are they so worried about creating anxiety when it comes to creating actual content that we actually look forward to, but instead they play around with the battle pass, and then the events, right? And of course the gacha, right? The banners, the limited banners, the weapon banners, and of course you have all the other things. That's what they have been exercising this entire time. Oh, but now they're concerned about our anxiety with the stuff that we actually look forward to. Ain't that something to take away from, right? To see how much of a contradiction that is as a whole. So it's all the more damning of why people are upset with this whole article here. But let's not forget and read the rest of the question. So, just like the Genius Invocation TCG that we unveiled in the special program for 3.2, we are also working on designing more interesting gameplay in the future. As an open world game, Genshin Impact has a natural compatibility with various types of gameplay, which gives us confidence in the long-term operations. Now, okay, so this could mean a lot of things, right? This could mean they're just gonna beat around the bush and give us all this like little weird mini game kind of bullshit, like the TCG, for example, right? And then they give us like the hide and seek stuff to be a permanent thing. Just arranging the gears to do that kind of puzzle sort of thing as a permanent part of the gameplay. Besides the combat stuff. But this could also mean that they're just saying, oh, we would like to do something, but it would be different from the Spiral Abyss. It could be combat oriented, but it's probably going to be formatted differently so that it's not so much the same vein as Spiral Abyss. But I don't know. But then again, they did say that it is similar to the Spiral Abyss. I don't know. This could be maybe just like a mistranslation. It's maybe a misunderstanding. Hopefully that could be the case, and that's like my sort of benefit of the doubt that I'm giving to Hoyoverse, and they will probably give us something we can definitely be excited about, and kind of willfully ignore the Spiral Abyss similar content that we've always been asking for. My hope, though, is that they at least give us some sort of training dummy, or like a stage where we can just like test our team, right? Just give us a big old training dummy like in Monster Hunter or whatever, and let us go at it, right? Give it like a ton of HP, whatever, right? So that way we can just see the absolute highest ceiling we can reach with our damage, because the way we test things right now, a lot of things are too low on HP. So you can't really see how much we could really do, right? How much we can actually perform, because we're too powerful, simply put. At least a good number of us anyway. There are the free-to-play players that really don't have the luxury to just like get all the weapons, or get a lot of the 4-star weapons, or people who kind of like play it very casually don't really have those good 4-star weapons by any means, and of course the event exclusive weapons as well. But nonetheless, though, a lot of us are still aching to have something to test just effectively. So I hope to see something like that. That's my big sort of wish from this whole thing. If you're not gonna really give us a Spiral Abyss sort of sub branch of sorts, At least give us that. At least give us a big old training dummy, neutral, right? No, like no special resistance. I mean, maybe you can set it up with the resistances, right? It's a training dummy. Why would you, why would you not have a programming ability or such? Why not give us all this flexibility to see, how our characters would perform with those circumstances and such like that, or just keep it completely neutral. Anything you want. I think that'd be a great way to incorporate that into Genshin Impact. Otherwise, this is just very disappointing on this side of things when it comes to combat. Because, a lot of people have been saying, and I do agree on that, the combat side of things is what we're really looking forward to. Because otherwise, what's the whole point of talents, the weapons, the domains, right, the artifacts for our characters? It's the combat. The combat is what's really fun in Genshin Impact. That's what's really driving the fun. It's not really sitting through the story. It's not really so much like looking for treasure or anything like that. I mean, what's the whole point, right? If that's what they're trying to emphasize, then, right? What's the whole point of the gacha? What's the whole point of all this RNG stuff that's incorporated in the first place, right? So that's there is some very odd and just blatantly ignorant things about what's going on with Hoyoverse right now. At least as of this moment with the interview here. But let's go on to the next question here. Genshin Impact is going into year 2 with the ever expanding roster. Some old characters might be left behind as power creep settles in and newer characters become much stronger choices. Is there a plan in place to potentially upgrade older characters and make them more viable? And of course, Hoyoverse answered, if a character is only assessed by a single dimension of numerical strength, power creep could indeed be an issue. However, in Genshin Impact, the rules of gameplay are more impactful than how strong a character is. Really? Therefore, new battlegrounds, new challenge levels, and even new team builds have all potential to bring new life to existing content. While on one side, I don't agree with that, I believe it's just straightforward as how powerful that character is, how useful that character is, and of course, the numbers are tied with that, right? Why would I pick someone like D-Luke over someone like Hu Tao / or Yoimiya or all the other DPS characters or and such like that, especially with all the other DPS characters coming into the future where they have these more updated kits and stuff like that. Why would I pick D-Luke over them? You see what I'm saying? Examples like that are a problem, especially with characters like Chi-Chi, Xinyan, where they're actually kind of broken, like in the worst way, or the worst possible way. For example, Chi-Chi can't really regenerate energy for herself when all the other healers can, which that itself is a problem. Now, of course, with C1, that could alleviate with some of that, but the fact is that I think she's still behind, even with C1 Constellation. She just has just not enough in her kit to really justify picking her over other characters. So I just rather pick someone else over Chi-Chi. In earlier game, yes, she was very very good because of what what was it like, sure. But as the game got harder, you wanted to do more damage. Therefore, someone like her isn't really viable at that point. You just pick more effective characters over Chi-Chi, right? I believe her application isn't really as good, I guess. You have to be pretty up close and stuff like that. And when you have characters like Ganyu and you have Rosaria, and then you're gonna have characters like Layla coming in with the cryo application, and of course you have Shinha, right? This big old field of ice, and versus when you have Chi-Chi, with the little ball and stuff like that. Now, granted, yes, it is her skill, and this could work with someone like, a up-close DPS and stuff like that. But overall, the energy generation is just so weak that you want to just pick other characters over her and such like that. There's other reasons why. And there's just characters like Xinyan who is just completely useless almost and is broken because she is just inconsistent and her scaling is just all over the place. So she doesn't just have a specialized scaling where you can just go hard on that and she will benefit from that a lot. So do you want to make her more of like a shield character or more of an offensive unit? But then again, it's like, well, do her numbers really deliver in the first place? Why not just grab her and then just grab somebody else like Eula, for example, right? Or even Razor. I mean, who's kind of easier to work with, and just grab another shield character at that point, or even Noelle, because you can just go hard in on defense, and you'll probably be fine with that. Xinyan is just very misguided. Feels like in comparison to all the other like DPS / Claymore characters and such. Hell, I mean, of course I pick Diluc over her because Xinyan, I mean, besides being 4-star, her stuff is just, it doesn't line up all that well. And so things like that are blatantly needing of a buff, right? Characters like Chi-Chi and of course Xinyan, especially Chi-Chi. She's a 5-star character, so you gotta give more reason to be happy to have a 5-star character, make you feel gratified, right? More powerful. That's kind of the whole point of these games, is to feel powerful, so that way you can deliver those big numbers and feel like you do all the damage and stuff like that. It feels good, right? Because we don't get to feel that in reality, which is why we play these video games, and yet Hoyoverse doesn't want to create that anxiety, so they don't give us that opportunity. And not only that, they're not going to even pay attention to the older characters. Now, the other side of this whole thing is that characters just get indirectly buffed, right? Diluc, now you can take Diluc in a different direction. My friend made a very good point where Diluc is now buffed technically because of someone like Candace. Candace can provide now hydro application with her ult or her burst, and Diluc can now consistently vape, and vaporize is a very good way to bring in damage. So you just with Candace's burst, you can throw in Diluc's normal attack and then do his skill, and that'll already be a vaporize attack. Rinse and repeat with his skill, and then you have his burst, and it'll light his sword on fire, and then there you go. I mean, it essentially is a way to buff characters like that. Kuchasara buffs all the other Electro characters, right? She buffs all the Electro crit damage, right? Once you have C6 especially, but her skill automatically just increases attack, right? But once you get C6, she's definitely a big buff to essentially all your Electro DPS characters. That's kind of how things have been going, is when other characters are being introduced, it in a way that indirectly buffs the other characters, depending on how their kits are and stuff like that, and how much of a synchronization they have with said character. So that one's definitely more situational. I can kind of definitely see why they're like very much taking this with eggshells and trying to not crack them and crush them by any means. They're trying to be very careful with this aspect of things, so that's why it like gives them all the more reason to have these 4-star characters coming in, like Candace, for example, right? So it gives them the reason to be there, is to help out the other characters, or certain other characters as well. So it all feels more fulfilling to get those 4-star characters. So I can kind of see what they're coming from, but there are just characters that are just flat out broken, and there are just things that are flat out not working right. Because there was the thing with Raiden Shogun's burst not working with Beto for some reason, I think, and then the whole thing with Chi-Chi and the whole thing with Xinyan and stuff like that. That's where those things need to have attention. And yet, they have these surveys, and I'm sure people have been mentioning this somewhere, but yeah, they're kind of just appearing to be willfully ignorant as of right now. Okay, so let's go to the next question here. With the introduction of Dendro has created plenty of new ways to cause elemental reactions, but some elements have been left out. Has there been any discussion regarding to the addition of new reactions for existing elements? For example, in the future, could there be a Geo and Dendro reaction? We have no such plans for the time being, that Hoyoverse answers. With the release of the Dendro element, the 7-element system has become somewhat complex. For us, there are other ways to increase fun for the players rather than simply increasing the complexity of game rules. With easy and open rules given some time, players will come to discover their own ways of building or ways of developing builds. That is the fun of this game. The balancing of all gameplay rules is part of the team's long-term design focus. So that already kind of contradicts itself. It's like, why are we building these teams, right? Combat, right? What do we do with these teams? We fight against monsters, we fight against enemies, we destroy them, with reactions, with all this stuff, with all the team synchronization. What's the whole point of building these teams, these builds? Combat, right? You see how much of a contradiction there is right now with this interview from Hoyoverse side? That's all the more damning. But anyway, okay, so the balancing of all gameplay is a part of a focus, long-term design focus. Plus, the team's experience and learning from player feedback in the long run are all important to maintain that focus. So if player feedback is important, why are you not adding the combat content? That's another thing. It's so weird that they answer stuff like this in this fashion, and it really paints them this way. Now, however, my friend also made a very interesting point, and I kind of do agree on it, is that right now I think it's okay because we have the freeze build, right? You can freeze them, and then you can apply Dendro, and then what I mean. So directly with Cryo and Dendro isn't really needed. I can definitely see that, but at the same time, I would like to see something from those elements reacting with each other. Maybe something with Anemo and Dendro. Yeah, I can kind of see that being left out because what else could you do? You know what I mean? I think we've already seen enough of that because Anemo, for the most part, can suck in the blooms, right, the seeds, and that is enough to compress it to explode on this particular enemy you want to explode on. I think that itself is enough. If they can come up with something creative, cool. But Anemo and Dendro, I'm okay with personally. Now, of course, with Geo and Dendro, that'd be kind of nice because you get to have a green shield, and maybe that'll have some special properties or something like that. But it'll just be all the more handy. But if you're gonna have Dendro, you're gonna have likely to have Electro and Hydro, right? And Pyro, right? And then if you're gonna have one Geo, that means you're gonna get shields from either of those three elements on your team. So that itself is it's not like you're gonna have like a 3 Geo team and then or 3 Dendro team and a Geo, which is kind of weird because what's the point? Because unless it's a character that really thrives off of Dendro elements, there's not really a whole point to that because there's no double Dendro reactions. I think as of right now, maybe there could be, but right now I don't think there's a real point to it. So that's why having Dendro and then Geo don't really work out because you definitely want to use Dendro and then Electro or Dendro and Hydro, right? And then you have another element like Pyro, for example. That's kind of how it goes for right now. That way, you have an incentive to mix those teams, right? This is why combat. You see how much combat how much combat there is in Genshin. Anyway, so that's I'm kind of like mixed on this one. I would like to see more updates to the gameplay, but at the same time, specifically with Geo, Dendro, yeah, it could be nice, but I'm gonna leave that to be neutral, or I'm gonna be neutral on that point for the most part. But it would be nice to see Cryo and Dendro react with each other at some point. But they didn't say no. They just said we have no plans for the time being. So I'm okay with that sort of answer, I guess. They're definitely trying to play around with the balance, I guess, with the gameplay Because again, why? Combat. But they are willing to ignore the combat for some reason because of anxiety. And again, anxiety is what they're that's the tool of gacha games like Genshin Impact, especially. On to the next question. The world of Teyvat continues to expand and giving players so many more challenges to complete daily domains, bosses, and ley lines, for example. Is there a chance we see a cap increase of original resin or a quicker regeneration rate to allow players to take more on these challenges each day? And Hoyoverse answered with this one: domains, bosses, and ley lines are important means to farm character, and weapon and session materials and resin are required to claim these as rewards. Well, I'm glad they're aware of that. Meanwhile, we're also providing more options for gamers to obtain character development items. For example, many character and weapon ascension materials can be obtained and redeemed from events that we run periodically. That sounds like to me they're just saying, oh, but we're providing you with this battle pass, with the stuff in the shop. We're providing you with these events that we don't want you to miss out on. You know, so that creates more of that incentive to join these events so you can get more of those materials and money and crystals and all that junk, right, to help power up your characters. Again, why were you powering up with these characters, right, for the combat? You know, so this is all the more damning of how much of a just this whole thing is a giant contradiction. Let's just put it that way for the most part. But I hope this means, though, for the time, what they're saying really is that, for the time being, enjoy the 160 resin because we have these events and battle passes and all this other stuff to provide you with. But be patient. We will increase that cap to 200 at the very later point and stuff like that. They didn't like flat out say, "Oh, we're not gonna do that." You know, they just said, "Oh, but this is another way to, you know." This could also mean, no, we're not gonna change the resin cap forever. This is 160 is the absolute maximum. At that point, you know, a lot of people have been coming up with these conspiracies, and also my friend as well, that they don't really want you to spend that much time on these games, even though we want to. Well, for the combat, of course. And yeah, they're just like, but they want you to spend money. They want you to spend your time and stuff like that. And then they want you to play with your anxiety and FOMO and such. It's just so weird of how all this is coming out, right? It's just all the more, just again, I have to say this again. It's all the more damning of how Hoyoverse is viewing Genshin Impact and its players, of course, and the whole spiel of it, right? I guess it's all about the story, the events, the adventure. Oh, and then you get to fight enemies along the way. So yeah, we'll just throw in this stuff because why not? Ah, man. Like all these things are locked behind resin. That's the problem with this whole thing. We can't really do much other than the story because it's all locked behind combat, or locked behind resin for the combat stuff, right? And to get rewards from it. If there is going to be a reduction in costs, then that could alleviate some of the worry and stuff like that too, right? You know, like if domains and stuff like that are reduced by half, or right, if we are planning to continue to have 160, then at least you can buff the awards, but they're not going to do that because they want to create that sort of incentive to play every day to get enough of the material to, well, power up your characters. Again, why are we powering up our characters? The combat, right? I'll keep going back to this point because this whole thing just sounds stupid. It really is. It's this whole interview and the answers given from Hoyoverse just sounds so stupid. But anyway, I know it's been a long video, but there's just so much to say about all these answers. There are a couple other questions, but this is another important one. New players may have been a little lost, or may have been a bit lost, when starting the Summertime Odyssey event because they missed Official and Mona's first introductions. This also happened when Scaramouche showed up in Inazuma's Archon quest after appearing in the limited time Mondstadt event. Is the team considering adding a new way for new players to see or replay old story-related content and cutscenes that only exist in past limited-time events. Yeah, so this was really a problem because this particular event, not only you missed out on Scaramouche's introduction, but you missed out on Officials and Mona's introduction. So that's a pretty big miss if when you have new players starting from any time after that. It was very confusing, I'm sure, for a lot of players. And now gladly I was stuck with the event, or stuck with the Genshin Impact for pretty much the entirety. So that's how I was able to see all this stuff. But I can imagine how confusing it was for a lot of players when Scaramouche showed up at Inazuma. It's like, who's this guy? And why did they know him already? The only way, of course, to see that is on YouTube, right? To catch up on the lore. But this is how they answer this for this question. We're aware of this issue and are looking into solutions for it. On one hand, stories from limited time events shall never become barriers to understanding and playing Archon quests. On the other hand, we're also working on beginner tutorial adjustments, client capacity optimization, and intelligent management of past content and other optimizations. And as our technology and capacity grow, we hope to have useful solutions to that players welcome. So at least they're looking into this. Hopefully we get to see some sort of like movie compilation of sorts, or something to look at and check out in a very interesting manner, and hopefully that will be executed well. But at least in this is the silver lining in this article, is that yes, this is a problem indeed, and we're looking into it. And there's the other stuff that you mentioned, like the client optimization and the technology and stuff like that. Hopefully that's a bit of a code speak for some cool stuff to come out of it too. We'll have to see about that. Okay, there's some like smaller questions, but let's see here. Costumes were added to the game last year, providing new stylish looks for some characters. How is that likely that the traveler becomes a recipient of one of these costumes? It would be interesting to see the traveler in clothing that represents some of the regions they enter on their journey. It is an intriguing idea to design outfits and accessories with regional characteristics for the traveler. We don't have anything to share on that front. We're always considering new ideas. Okay, so hopefully we'll see something like that, but I guess. Alright. As a follow-up to previous question, Aether and Lumine seem to get fun little accessories during certain quests, like a mask or a flower crown that can only be worn for short periods of time. Have you considered turning these temporary accessories into permanent cosmetics? We've been discussing this question within the team and some ideas similar to it. However, we don't have any news or details to reveal at this time. Again, with that little tease, right? On top of Genshin Impact, Hoyoverse is also working on Honkai Impact 3rd, Zenless Zone 0, and Honkai Star Rail. There's been a crossover between Genshin Impact and Honkai 3rd in the past, where Catching and Visual arrived in Honkai Impact. Are there any plans in store to do the reverse? Bring characters from Honkai Impact 3rd into Genshin Impact? And then they answered, lastly, in terms of characterization, we wish to channel more effort and attention into creating characters from the world of Genshin Impact. If there are new opportunities for crossover in the future, we will be sure to share them with everyone. So right now, I mean, I guess the universe is a little too small for that, I guess. Even though they included, characters like Visual and Catching into Honkai Impact. But, that's because, of course, the Honkai Impact 3rd team are the ones working on that, rather than the Genshin Impact team. So it looks like they're really hard focused on what they want to do in Genshin Impact. And that leads me to this point, right? On one hand, it feels like they really don't want to talk about, combat being the emphasis and stuff like that, and they don't want to make that the overall sort of philosophy on the game, even though it is what we look forward to, right? Why are we building these characters? Why are we doing all this stuff? Why are we pulling for these characters? Why are we, doing all? Why are we pulling for the weapons? Why are we? What's the whole point of all that? The combat. If there's not much combat to look forward to besides what we have already, then what's the whole point, right? But I think this whole discussion or interview is something Hoyoverse was put on the spot to do, and with that, they don't really want to talk about like stuff that they have potentially in the oven, and they don't want to like potentially reveal anything in GameSpot of all places, and instead they want to really reveal all that stuff within their Hoyoverse presentations, like all the special programs, all those like the 3.1, 3 point whatever, right? For example, they want to reveal it there. So hopefully this is all just like a misunderstanding of sorts, and this is just them talking out of their ass, and hopefully this could all mean like this is just something we can look past on, and hopefully they do something about it. It's just that they don't want to talk about it here of all places. But at the same time, it does consistently reveal how they feel about the game to sort of to an extent. Unlike the players, right? The players see one thing, the developers see another thing, and that's kind of just unfortunate. Like it's just kind of like butting heads, and nothing is getting done. No, there's not much more pleasing other than what we've seen already, like the new characters, new story, new region, of course, right? Now one should at least consider this, right? It just seems like they do have plans in store, and they're dead set and stubborn on that plan. Just like what happened with Electro, right? People wanted Electro to be buffed for a very long time, but they didn't, because guess what? We have Dendro. That's something they've had in mind for a very long time. Dendro was always there to react beautifully with Electro, and that's why characters like Ketching are now great because of that. And Shinobu is gaining way more mileage because of Dendro. And not to mention, elemental mastery and all that stuff being thrown in there too as another valuable stat now, especially more than ever. It's that, and so in that regard, I think that's what's going to happen, right? They don't really want to reveal anything until they get there, right? We get to that bridge, and then they're gonna open all the floodgates to all this cool content, right? Maybe it might not be, like I said, it's not gonna be in the same vein as, or similar vein as Spiral Abyss, but it might be something else. That's what I hope to see. That's kind of like my benefit of the doubt on this one, but I do understand overall feeling of disappointment and upsetness, and a lot of players are kind of just losing motivation. They just like kind of tossed out their sort of enthusiasm for the game, at least for the moment. I completely understand that, because it does spit on, right now it is spitting on the combat aspect of things, which is again a huge point in Genshin Impact, whether they like it or not. There's just this very blatant this contradiction and ignorance that's definitely going on in this article. Again, I hope they're just talking out of their ass and they just came up with words so that they just hope to, not reveal anything. And because they, their Hoyoverse and stuff like that, and they got Genshin Impact, people are going to still stick around for a long time, long enough to see what's the new stuff going to be like. We have the anime coming. We've had that concert. There's just been things that they've been flexing on, and yeah, people like it, but it's like, well, I just wish that they just said, look, please be patient. We got stuff for you. We still have great things to tell you. We still have a story to tell, and there is stuff to look forward to. I wish they delivered that way, but they have their own way to do it, and that's just how it goes, I guess, for right now. Well, for right now, this interview sucks. It's very disappointing to see, and a lot of people, including my friend, have been left feeling soured by this whole thing. It just leaves that just bitter, sour taste in their mouth for right now, especially with how they view resin for right now. I mean, I don't know, this could be a very sort of Asian philosophy, or Chinese philosophy on things, of how they build their video games and such, especially with live service. But there is a lot to take away from. There is a lot to discuss. There is a lot of things to say. There's a lot of opinions, and I do understand the overall disappointment that comes with it. But what do I still like the game? Of course I do. Why do you think I've been making content for it? Why do you think I've been sticking around for the game for a long time, even to the point where yes, I drop money for the game. Especially for the battle pass, especially for some of the characters, because I love the characters, right? I love the lore, I love the mythos, I love everything within this world of Genshin Impact that it has to offer. It's just so interesting, it's so fascinating, it's so beautiful, it's great, and it feels good to play the game, right? The reaction-based combat with the damage and everything, the team synchronization, the quick swapping, it just feels all so good. While it does have its frustrations, sure, but it's just so fun. Which is why I've been sticking around with the game for a very long time, and it's just sad to see that they resort to this sort of route to, keep it to themselves and please themselves, but not so much, pleasing the players and putting us on the same page with them. They're not so willing to do that. They really seem to have a battle plan, and hopefully that battle plan is good. That's what I hope to see. But good God, that interview could have gone way better, man. You're tugging on a lot of heartstrings. You're playing with fire, man. That's all I can say for that little bit of for that little bit, I guess. So I know there's a lot to say, but that's the basics of what I got. So if anyone who loves Genshin Impact, or who has been playing Genshin Impact for a while, I would love to see all your opinions down below. I mean, what are your thoughts about this whole thing? And what is Genshin Impact to you guys, right? That's another question too, that to go along with this. I mean, all those comments related to this are welcome down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps out, and I do appreciate it. Check out all the links in the description as well. But yeah, this week has not been a good week for players of Genshin Impact, despite the cool updates that have been coming along with it. Samara has been about a fun experience, and it's been looking great, better than ever in that regard alone. But this stuff, man, leaves definitely a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, and including mine, at least to an extent. But again, let's give it some time. Let's hope for the best, and let's just see what happens. That's all I can say. Maybe their way of seeing things is that because there are these other games, they're gonna cater to the sweaties and the tryhards and all the hardcore players, right? With ZZZ, whatever, Zenless and Star Rail, whatever. Maybe, I don't know. So we'll have to see, and just hope for the best. So thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao now.